A serial killer is a person who has committed multiple murders over a period of time, typically with a similar or consistent pattern or motive. The term serial killer was coined in the 1970s by FBI agent Robert Ressler, and it generally refers to individuals who have killed 3 or more people with a cooling-off period in between each murder. Serial killers are often motivated by a variety of factors, including power, control, revenge, or a desire for attention or fame. They may also suffer from mental illness or have experienced childhood trauma or abuse. It is important to note that serial killers are a relatively rare phenomenon, and most people with mental illness or a history of trauma do not become serial killers. Additionally, while serial killers can be sensationalized in the media, it is important to remember that their actions are heinous and not to be glorified or romanticized. There have unfortunately been many notorious serial killers throughout history, but some of the most well-known include Ted Bundy, an American serial killer who murdered at least 30 young women and girls in the 1970s. He was known for his charm and good looks, which allowed him to lure his victims into his car before killing them. Jeffrey Dahmer, an American serial killer and cannibal who murdered 17 young men and boys in the 1980s. He would often lure his victims back to his apartment, where he would drug and strangle them before dismembering their bodies. John Wayne Gacy, an American serial killer who murdered at least 33 young men and boys in the 1970s. He would often lure his victims to his home, where he would torture and kill them before burying their bodies in his crawl space. Andrei Chikatilo, a Soviet serial killer who murdered at least 52 people, mostly young women and children, in the 1970s and 1980s. He was known as the Butcher of Rostov, and would often mutilate his victims' bodies. Harold Shipman, a British doctor who was convicted of murdering 15 of his patients in the 1990s, but is suspected to have killed over 200 people throughout his career. These are just a few examples of some of the most infamous serial killers in history, but there are unfortunately many more cases that have shocked and horrified the world. The motives of a serial killer can vary greatly from case to case, but some common motives include power and control. Many serial killers have a desire to control and dominate their victims, often stemming from feelings of powerlessness or insecurity in their own lives. Sexual gratification. Some serial killers derive pleasure from sexual acts involving their victims, and may be motivated by a desire to fulfill their sexual fantasies or to exert dominance over their victims. Revenge. Some serial killers may be motivated by a desire for revenge against a particular group or individual, often stemming from a perceived personal injustice or grudge. Mental illness. Some serial killers suffer from mental illnesses such as psychopathy, schizophrenia, or borderline personality disorder, which can contribute to their violent behavior. Childhood trauma or abuse. Some serial killers have experienced significant trauma or abuse during childhood, which can lead to feelings of anger, frustration, or a desire for revenge later in life. It's important to note that these are just some of the potential motives for serial killers, and that each case is unique. Additionally, many people with similar experiences or characteristics do not become serial killers, so it's not accurate to say that any particular factor will inevitably lead to violent behavior. There have been several cases of serial killers who have never been caught by police or authorities. Some examples include the Zodiac Killer, a serial killer who operated in Northern California in the late 1960s and early 1970s. The Zodiac Killer is believed to have killed at least 5 people and may have been responsible for as many as 37 murders. Despite an intensive manhunt, the killer was never caught, and his identity remains unknown to this day. The Long Island Serial Killer, a serial killer who operated in New York in the early 2010s. The Long Island serial killer is believed to have killed at least 10 people, mostly sex workers. Despite an extensive investigation, the killer has never been caught. The Original Night Stalker, also known as the Golden State Killer, this serial killer operated in California in the 1970s and 1980s, and is believed to have killed at least 13 people and committed more than 50 rapes. The killer was not identified or caught until 2018, when DNA evidence led to the arrest of a suspect. Jack the Ripper, a notorious serial killer who operated in London in the late 1800s, Jack the Ripper is believed to have killed at least 5 women, all of them prostitutes. Despite a massive manhunt and countless theories about the killer's identity, he was never caught and his identity remains a mystery to this day. These are just a few examples of serial killers who have never been caught, and unfortunately, there may be many more cases where the killer has evaded justice.